We've all seen it, right? That super bright, creative kid who, for some reason, just seems to hit a wall in school. Well, today we're going to dive into exactly why that happens. We're exploring the world of learning disabilities, cutting through all the myths and confusion to really understand what they are, how they're identified, and most importantly, what actually works to help these learners shine. Let's get right into it. I mean, it's the question that can keep parents and teachers up at night. You see a student who is so clearly smart, so capable, but there's this weird disconnect when it comes to things like reading or writing or math. So, what is really going on there? And this, right here, is the classic sign of a learning disability. It's this incredibly frustrating mismatch between a student's obvious potential and how they're actually doing in school. It's not about not trying hard enough, it's about a very specific and often hidden struggle. Yeah, this whole idea of an unexpected struggle is so central to what we're talking about that we've got to take a closer look. Let's really unpack this signature characteristic. This is the key distinction. We're not talking about a student's overall intelligence. In fact, kids with learning disabilities often have average or even well above average intelligence. The challenge is really specific to certain academic skills, which is what makes the struggle seem so, well, unexpected, given everything else you see them do. And this is exactly why getting in there early is so critical. This isn't just a phase a kid goes through. Without the right kinds of support, that gap between their potential and their performance can actually get wider and wider over time, creating a challenge that can last a lifetime. Okay, so to really get this, we need to be crystal clear on what a learning disability is, and maybe just as importantly, what it is not. A lot of the stigma and the confusion really comes from misunderstanding this fundamental difference. So at its very core, a learning disability is a neurological difference. Just think of it like the brain is wired a little differently, and that wiring affects how it processes information, especially language. This can make something like sounding out words, with dyslexia, or just organizing your thoughts for an essay incredibly difficult. It's a biological reality. It's not a choice or a lack of trying. Now, this is a really crucial distinction to make. With a learning disability, the challenge is specific. It's like a single roadblock on a highway that's otherwise totally clear. Their intelligence is generally average or even higher. On the other hand, an intellectual disability involves more global challenges that affect cognitive abilities and daily life skills much more broadly. Totally different things. So let's just bust some of these common and honestly harmful myths right now. A learning disability is absolutely not a sign of laziness. In fact, these students are often working way harder than their peers just to keep up. It's not caused by bad teaching or a tough home life, though, those things can certainly make the struggle harder. At its root, it's an intrinsic difference in the brain, period. Okay, so once we understand all that, it leads to this massive and really positive shift in how we help these students. We're moving away from a model of just waiting for them to fail and moving toward a much more proactive way of thinking. For decades, the old way of doing things was this discrepancy model. What that basically meant was we had to wait for a student to fall really, really far behind before they could get any help. It was a wait-to-fail system. It was awful. Now, thankfully, the focus has shifted to a much better model called response to intervention, or RTI. And the whole goal here is early identification and support for any student who starts to struggle. So how does RTI actually work? Well, think of it kind of like a public health screening, but for learning. In Tier 1, every single student gets top-notch research-based teaching. Now, if a student still struggles, they move to Tier 2 for more targeted help, maybe in a small group. And only if they're still having a hard time after that do they move to the super intensive, one-on-one help of Tier 3, which might involve a formal evaluation. The key is, we're giving support the moment a kid needs it. So just how many students are we talking about here? To give you some perspective, back in the 2010-2011 school year, there were 2.4 million students between the ages of 6 and 21 identified with a specific learning disability, and that's just in the US. And to put that number into even more context, students with learning disabilities make up the single biggest group in all of special education. We're talking almost 37% of all students getting services. So what does that really mean? It means pretty much every teacher in every school is going to be working with students who have learning disabilities. Which brings us to the most important question of all. What can we actually do about it? What are the strategies that really work to support these learners? All right, listen up, because if you only take away one thing from this entire explainer, let it be this. The strategies that are the most effective for students with learning disabilities are the exact same strategies that help all students learn better. This isn't about some secret bag of tricks. It's just about clear, structured, and really effective teaching for everyone. And here are some of those powerful, evidence-based strategies we're talking about. Things like explicit instruction, where teachers don't just hint at things, they clearly state what they're teaching and why it matters. Or using graphic organizers, visual maps to help students see how ideas connect. That can be a total game changer for a kid who struggles with organization. Or providing guided notes so students can actually focus on the lecture instead of just scrambling to write everything down. These are just principles of great teaching, plain and simple. The very best teachers are almost like detectives in their approach. They see a specific challenge, like a student struggling to organize their ideas for an essay, and they intentionally match it with a specific strategy, like a graphic organizer. It's just a really thoughtful, intentional way of meeting students exactly where they are. So where should all this fantastic teaching and support be happening? Well, that brings us to our final and maybe our most important point, the power of inclusion. The reality today, and this is so important to remember, is that the vast majority of students with learning disabilities spend most of their school day right where they belong, in the general education classroom, learning right alongside their peers. And that means supporting them is a shared responsibility. It's not just for special ed teachers, it's for every single educator in that school. Which leaves all of us with this one last critical question. We have the science, we have the strategies that work. The real work now is in applying all that knowledge to create classrooms where every single student, no matter how their brain is wired, has the chance to truly thrive. The goal isn't just to help them cope, it's to empower them to succeed. Thanks for joining this explainer.